the woman who held everything together. Eleanor Brooks learned early that silence was a survival skill. At 42, she was a single mother living in a modest townhouse in suburban New Jersey, the kind of place where lawns were trimmed with judgment and neighbors smiled only when they needed something. Welcome to my channel Brinicle Reads. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and like my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., Eleanor woke before the world did. She brewed black coffee, checked emails, packed her daughter's lunch, and stood quietly in the doorway of 16-year-old Lily's room, watching her sleep, wondering how they had grown so far apart without Eleanor noticing when it happened. Eleanor worked as a senior strategy manager at Hawthorne Global, a legacy American corporation founded nearly 50 years ago. She had been there 17 years. She'd built teams, saved failing accounts, and designed campaigns that doubled profits. Her work was praised in private and borrowed in public. She never complained. That was her mistake. The promotion had been whispered about for months, Director of Strategic Operations. Her name floated through meetings like an assumption. Even her daughter joked, "Guess I'll finally see you less when you're rich." Eleanor smiled. She didn't correct her. At work, her male colleague Ryan Keller laughed louder, spoke longer, and borrowed phrases Eleanor had used weeks earlier. She noticed but didn't accuse. Maybe coincidence. Maybe teamwork. She didn't want baggage. The company founder, Walter Hawthorne, an aging man with a slow walk and kind eyes, still stopped by Eleanor's desk to ask how Lily was doing. He trusted her. That mattered. Or so she thought. The promotion that never came. The announcement happened on a Thursday. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. Eleanor sat upright, hands folded, heart steady. She had earned this. The managing director, Evan Hawthorne, Walter's son, cleared his throat. "We're excited to announce Ryan Keller as our new Director of Strategic Operations." Applause. Eleanor felt it before she understood it, a quiet crack somewhere inside her chest. Ryan smiled wide. Too wide. Evan continued, "We believe leadership at this level requires decisiveness. Availability. A certain edge." Eleanor didn't miss the pause before availability. After the meeting, Evan avoided her eyes. Ryan patted her shoulder and said, "Next time, Ellie." She went to the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. No tears. Just heat behind the eyes. That night, Lily barely looked up from her phone. "Did you get it?" she asked. "No," Eleanor said. "Oh." Lily shrugged. Figures. That hurt more than the promotion. The accident. The power came on a rainy night Eleanor didn't expect to survive. She slipped on wet concrete in the parking garage after working late, again. Her head struck metal. There was darkness. Pressure. Then noise. Voices. Too many. Not spoken aloud. "She's bleeding. She's old. Should have left earlier. Single moms are always exhausted." Eleanor screamed. At the hospital, tests showed nothing unusual. Mild concussion. Stress. But when the male nurse adjusted her she heard it. "Don't flirt. Don't flirt." She froze. Over the next days, it became undeniable. She could hear men's thoughts. Only men. Everywhere. At first, it nearly broke her. Seeing the world as it is. Work became unbearable. Evan's thoughts were the worst. She's competent but emotional. Board won't respect a woman like her. Ryan's easier. Less complicated. Ryan's were worse. She built this. I just took it. She'll never prove it. Eleanor stopped sleeping. Then she started listening. Really listening. One afternoon, she overheard two executives thinking about downsizing single parents first. She recorded dates. Words. Patterns. She learned control, not blocking the power, but narrowing it. At home, Lily's boyfriend Jason came over. He smiled sweetly, held Lily's hand. Inside his head, she's easy to control. Her mom's weak. Eleanor's jaw tightened. The security man. Frank Morales had been part of Hawthorne Global for as long as Eleanor could remember. He was the kind of man people stopped seeing after a while, not because he blended into walls, but because he never demanded attention. Mid-60s. Broad shoulders softened by time. Gray mustache always trimmed. His uniform pressed with care, even on night shifts when no executives were around to notice. Every evening Eleanor stayed late, which was often. Frank would nod once as she passed the security desk. Evening, Ms. Brooks, he'd say. Evening, Frank, she'd reply, always polite, always distant. They had exchanged maybe 100 of these greetings over the years, and yet Eleanor knew almost nothing about him. Not where he lived. Not whether he had kids. Not whether he was happy. In corporate life, people like Frank existed on the edges, necessary, respected in theory, but rarely included in concern. That night, Eleanor stayed past 10. The office floor was nearly empty, lights dimmed, and cleaning crews humming softly in the background. Her head ached, not from work, but from restraint. Holding the power in was exhausting. Narrowing it. Controlling it. She passed the security desk again. Frank nodded. And then. The pills are running low. Insurance won't cover the new dosage. If I lose this job, she's done. I'm too old to start over. Eleanor stopped walking. The thoughts weren't loud. They weren't frantic. They were tired. Heavy. Like a man who had already accepted loss and was simply bracing for it. She turned slowly. Frank was pretending to read a clipboard. Eleanor felt something unfamiliar tighten in her chest, not anger. Not satisfaction. Recognition. She approached the desk. Frank, she said gently. Do you have a minute? He looked up, startled. Of course, ma'am. Everything all right? She hesitated. For once, the power didn't feel like an invasion, it felt like an invitation. I was just wondering, she said carefully, how long have you been working nights? Frank smiled faintly. Since my wife got sick. Easier to manage appointments during the day. There it was. Spoken aloud. A small truth, offered without knowing how much had already been heard. What kind of sick? Eleanor asked. Frank paused. His eyes flicked down to the desk. Autoimmune. It's one of those things that doesn't get better. Just more expensive. He laughed softly, without humor. I shouldn't be complaining. I've got a job. That's more than most guys my age. Inside his head, the truth echoed darker. They'll replace me with someone younger. Cheaper. Faster. Eleanor pulled out the chair opposite him and sat. I don't think you should be working nights alone, she said. Frank blinked. I'm sorry. She leaned in slightly. Your overtime logs don't match your medical leave forms. That's not your fault. It's the system's. Frank stiffened. Ms. Brooks, I don't want any trouble. You're not in trouble, she said firmly. But you are being overlooked. For the first time since she'd known him, Frank's hands trembled. I just need this job, he said quietly. Just long enough. Eleanor nodded. She stood, straightened her jacket, and said something that surprised them both. Let me take care of it. The next morning, Eleanor didn't go to her desk. She went to HR. Normally, she avoided the department. HR existed to protect the company, not the people. But Eleanor now heard what happened behind closed doors. She knew which managers thought compassion was weakness and which ones hid behind policy to avoid decency. She requested Frank's file. No one questioned it. She reviewed benefits eligibility, cross-referenced medical allowances, and found outdated forms that had never been updated because Frank hadn't known to ask. She adjusted schedules so Frank's night shifts were reduced, but listed as strategic rotation, not accommodation. She rerouted overtime through a discretionary pool approved months ago but never used. Then she pushed. Not loudly. Not publicly. Precisely. By Friday, Frank's wife was approved for expanded coverage. By Monday, Frank's schedule changed. By Wednesday, his job was secure for the next 2 years under a retention program no one bothered to audit closely. Eleanor never signed her name to any of it. When Frank saw her again, he was standing straighter. Ms. Brooks, he said, voice unsteady. They fixed it. The insurance. The hours. She nodded. Good. Frank swallowed. I don't know how to thank you. Inside his mind, there was only one thought, clear and overwhelming. Someone saw me. Tears filled his eyes before he could stop them. I thought no one cared, he whispered. Eleanor felt something crack inside her, not break, but open. She thought of all the times she had swallowed injustice quietly. All the nights she'd sat in her car after work, gripping the steering wheel, convincing herself endurance was strength. She had been wrong. Strength was intervention. You matter, she said simply. Frank nodded, wiping his face with the sleeve of his uniform, embarrassed but unashamed. You know, he said, forcing a small smile, I always thought you were like the rest of them. Too busy to notice. Eleanor smiled back. I used to be. That night, driving home, Eleanor turned the radio off. For the first time since the accident, she didn't try to block the voices. She listened, not to ambition, not to cruelty, not to fear, but to quiet men carrying invisible weight. Janitors. Guards. Maintenance staff. Men whose thoughts were filled not with power, but with survival. She realized something profound. This ability wasn't a weapon. It was a responsibility. And for the first time, she felt worthy of it. The man who stole her voice. Eleanor didn't confront Ryan right away. That was the first mistake most people made, confusing anger for action. Instead, she watched. From the outside, Ryan Keller looked like a success story. Early 30s. Sharp suits. Confident smile. He walked the halls like the building owed him something. People laughed at his jokes. Executives nodded when he spoke. Inside his head, though, the noise was constant. Just keep repeating it. They won't check. She won't fight back. Eleanor sat across from him in meetings and listened as he presented strategies she had once drafted alone at midnight, her daughter asleep in the next room. He used her metaphors, her frameworks, even her pauses. Each time, the room leaned in. Each time, she said nothing. Ryan mistook her silence for weakness. That was his second mistake. She began building a timeline. Not a dramatic one. A clean one. Dates. Drafts. Versions saved to private folders before Ryan ever mentioned the ideas. Internal messages. Calendar invites. She noticed that Ryan's breakthroughs always appeared weeks after her late-night submissions to herself, documents she never shared. She printed nothing. She forwarded nothing. She simply remembered. At night, the power whispered truths she didn't ask for. I hope she never checks the archive. If she does, I'll say it was collaborative. She won't push. Women like her never do. The word never echoed in Eleanor's mind. The opportunity came during a quarterly board presentation. Ryan was scheduled to present the company's new long-term strategy, a plan the board believed would define Hawthorne Global's next decade. The room was packed. Evan Hawthorne sat at the head of the table. The founder, Walter Hawthorne, attended remotely via video, his face lined but attentive. Eleanor sat near the back. Ryan began confidently. He spoke smoothly, hands open, voice assured. Slides appeared behind him, slides Eleanor had once refined until dawn. As he spoke, Eleanor listened, not to the room, but to the thoughts. Just don't look at her. Get through the first 10 minutes. They already trust me. He reached the third slide. And then Eleanor stood. I'm sorry, she said calmly, her voice cutting cleanly through the room. May I clarify something before we continue? The room froze. Ryan stiffened. Evan frowned. Ms. Brooks. This will only take a moment, Eleanor said, her tone polite, unshakable. She walked forward, every step measured. That framework, she continued, gesturing to the screen, was first proposed internally during Q2 planning. I can provide the original time-stamped draft if needed. Silence. Ryan swallowed. Inside his head, panic erupted. She knows. How does she know? Walter Hawthorne leaned closer to the camera. Is that true, Ryan? Ryan forced a laugh. It was a team effort. Eleanor and I. Eleanor nodded. I agree. Collaboration is essential. That's why version histories exist. She turned to the board. If you'd like, I can walk you through the development process. Step by step. No accusation. No emotion. Just clarity. Ryan's thoughts unraveled. I didn't think she'd do this. Not here. Evan shifted in his seat. The board asked questions. Ryan stumbled. Eleanor answered, precisely, confidently, without triumph. By the end of the meeting, the air had changed. Ryan resigned 2 weeks later. Officially, it was for personal reasons. Unofficially, he couldn't breathe in a room where truth had caught up with him. Eleanor never celebrated. She simply returned to her desk and continued working. Inside, though, something settled. Justice didn't roar. It arrived quietly, and stayed. The managing director's reckoning. Evan Hawthorne had never apologized to anyone in his life. He didn't need to. He was the founder's son. The heir. The man who inherited authority without learning how to carry it. But after Ryan's resignation, something shifted. The hallways grew quieter when Evan passed. Conversations stopped. The confidence that once clung to him like a tailored suit now looked strained, ill-fitting. Eleanor noticed it immediately. She also heard it. I didn't think it would collapse like this. I chose wrong. I let my assumptions decide. Evan called her into his office on a Monday morning. The room was polished steel and glass, designed to intimidate. Eleanor sat calmly across from him, hands folded, posture relaxed. She didn't need armor anymore. I owe you clarity, Evan began, avoiding her eyes. She waited. I believed leadership required availability, he said carefully. I thought your personal life might be inconvenient. Eleanor finished softly. Evan winced. Inside his mind, guilt churned. I never said it out loud. That doesn't make it better. My decision wasn't fair, he admitted. And it wasn't based on performance. Eleanor nodded. I know. That startled him. She stood to leave. I'm correcting it, Evan said quickly. The board agrees. Effective immediately. Director of Strategic Operations. The title Eleanor had earned years ago. No speech. No praise. Just the quiet restoration of what should never have been taken. Later that day, Walter Hawthorne asked to see her. The founder's voice was weaker now, but his eyes were sharp. I failed you, he said simply. Eleanor shook her head. You trusted the wrong people. It happens. Walter smiled sadly. Not to women like you. As Eleanor left the office, she realized something important. Vindication didn't feel like triumph. It felt like release. Mother and daughter. The hardest repair wasn't at work. It was at home. Lily had grown sharp in Eleanor's absence, defensive, sarcastic, and distant. The distance wasn't cruelty, it was protection. Teenagers built walls when they felt unseen. Jason had been part of that wall. Eleanor had heard his thoughts months ago. Manipulation disguised as affection. Control disguised as charm. But she never interfered. One night, Lily came home late. Too late. Her eyes were red. She dropped her backpack and sat on the kitchen floor like a child. He lied to me, Lily said. Eleanor sat beside her. He made me feel stupid, Lily whispered. Like everything was my fault. Eleanor pulled her into her arms. I know, she said. Not from the power, from memory. They stayed there for a long time. Eleanor didn't lecture. Didn't warn. Didn't say I told you so. She listened. In that silence, trust began to return. Over the following weeks, they talked more. About boundaries. About love that didn't hurt. About strength that didn't shout. One night, Lily asked, why didn't you leave your job when it treated you like that? Eleanor thought carefully. Because I wanted you to see that walking away isn't the only way to survive, she said. Sometimes, staying and changing the room matters. Lily nodded. Something in her posture softened. The rift didn't vanish. But it healed. The neighbor who lost his voice. Mr. Donnelly had always believed proximity gave him power. HOA complaints. Passive-aggressive notes. Calls about noise that didn't exist. After Eleanor's promotion, he escalated. He filed formal grievances. Claimed violations. Suggested inspections. Inside his head, Eleanor heard it clearly. She thinks she's better than us now. She didn't confront him emotionally. She attended the HOA meeting. Prepared. calm. She presented timelines, permits, and recordings. She asked questions that exposed inconsistencies without accusation. Mr. Donnelly stammered. Board members exchanged looks. The complaints were dismissed. Permanently. As the meeting ended, Mr. Donnelly avoided her gaze. Eleanor didn't smile. She simply nodded. Power, she'd learned, didn't need drama. It needed documentation. Letting go of the power. The thoughts faded slowly. Not all at once. Not dramatically. One morning, Eleanor realized she could no longer hear the noise. She waited for panic. It didn't come. At work, she spoke freely. People listened. At home, Lily laughed again. Frank waved proudly from the security desk. Eleanor understood then. The power had taught her how to listen. She no longer needed it. Because she had found her voice. And the world had finally learned to hear it. That's our story for today. If it resonated with you, show your support by liking and subscribing to the channel. I'd love to see how far our community reaches. Drop a comment below and let me know which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I can't wait to see where all you wonderful people are tuning in from.